So, some big news here. Mexico elects leftist Claudia Sheinbaum as first female president in its history. Now, if you thought that Mexico would elect a first woman president before the United States, you would have won some money. If you thought the name of the first Mexican woman president would be Claudia Sheinbaum, you'd have won a whole lot of money. You'd have gotten pretty good odds. Yeah, Claudia Sheinbaum is going to be the first woman president from Mexico.
Yes. You know, the one thing I did not research, is she Jewish?
Well, she's from Jewish. I don't think she's a practicing Jew, but yes, she's of Jewish ethnicity with a name like that. I don't think any Gentiles change their name to Sheinbaum.
Only in Hollywood.
Yeah, or did she marry into it? I don't know. Claudia Sheinbaum, it says in here, I forget.
That's like Saul Goodman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Claudia Sheinbaum, a U.S.-educated scientist turned politician, was elected Sunday as Mexico's first female president, shattering gender barriers in a country known for a culture of machismo and high rates of violence against women. In 200 years of the Mexican Republic, I have become the first woman president, she told supporters in her acceptance speech, describing her victory as a win for all women. I did not arrive alone. She said, we all arrived. Here's a piece of her acceptance speech.
Todo es el reconocimiento del pueblo de México a nuestro proyecto de nación. Agradezco también porque por primera vez en 200 años de la República me convertiré en la primera mujer presidenta de México. Y como lo he dicho en otras ocasiones, no llego sola, llegamos todas, con nuestras heroínas que nos dieron patria, con nuestras ancestras, nuestras madres, nuestras hijas y nuestras nietas.
So we'll go back to the article here. The leftist, former mayor of Mexico City, Sheinbaum, 61, will also become the first president of Jewish ancestry in the overwhelmingly Catholic country. So she is, I guess, of Jewish ancestry. She didn't marry into it, and it doesn't seem to note whether or not she's practicing. Most people in the chat say she's non-practicing.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. She will lead a prosperous but polarized nation that in recent years has been plagued by widespread gang violence. She will be closely watched to see how she navigates the long shadow of her mentor, outgoing President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO for short, obviously. Sheinbaum was elected in landslide fashion, according to preliminary vote counts, which showed her winning with 58% of the vote compared with 30% for her closest rival, Xochitl Galvez Ruiz. That's how I say that name. Is that right? How do you say it?
Xochitl? I mean,
Xochitl?
I mean, going by how you would say, like, Quetzalcoatl or Tenochtitlan.
Yeah, but Quetzalcoatl is Q, and then I don't know. I don't think that she pronounces it Xochitl. That would be a very difficult name to run for office under.
This is
Xochitl Ruiz. Yeah.
This is what happens when you have no formal journalism training.
Xochitl Galvez Ruiz. There we go. Although Lopez Obrador was not on the ballot, many viewed the election as a referendum on his term. In Mexico, you get 1 6-year term, I believe it is. So that's why.
And that's it. You can't run again.
Yeah, on him.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. Many Sheinbaum supporters say they believe she would advance Lopez Obrador's trademark anti-poverty policies, particularly his government's welfare payments to students and elderly people. She is going to continue with all the help that the president has given us, said Rosa Maria Velasco, 52-year-old teacher. She will continue to support the poorest. Galvez supporters, on the other hand, largely said they backed her because she promised to change the course set by Lopez Obrador, AMLO. I'm very angry at this government, says Juliana Jujnovsky, 45, a professor of biology. She said she didn't oppose Lopez Obrador's ideology so much as his style of governing. He doesn't want any opposition, says Jujnovsky, who described the president's efforts to reform the Supreme Court, slash the number of seats in Mexico's legislature, and overhaul the country's elections institute as part of a deterioration of Mexico's democracy. Democracy depends on counterweights and listening to the other side, she said. Scheinbaum, for her part, has dismissed such questions as misogynist. There you go. She knows where to go. Her victory was groundbreaking development in a country where women were barred from voting until 1954. Her success is in some way a culmination of years of efforts by Mexican authorities to impose gender equality in a nation where politics was traditionally a male affair. A 2019 constitutional reform set quotas requiring gender parity in all elected posts at the federal, state, and municipal levels. Today, more than half of the members of Mexico's Congress are women, the fourth highest rate in the world. 8 of the nation's 31 governors are female, and a woman heads the Supreme Court. Sunday's election was Mexico's largest ever, with voters also choosing a new Congress, 8 state governors, the Mexico City mayor, and some 20,000 local office holders nationwide. Preliminary results showed that Morena performed well in the congressional elections and would, as part of a coalition with 2 allied parties, likely have a supermajority that would allow it to easily pass legislation. Scheinbaum spent much of her career as an academic, although she was raised in a highly political family. Both her parents were active in the 1968 student movement, best known for the infamous Tlatelolco, I don't know if I'm saying that right, massacre in which Mexican
I am glad you're
forces,
reading this one.
Yeah, exactly. Killed scores of protesters at the Capitol. I believe that was depicted in that movie Roma a while back, the sort of biographical piece that Alfonso Cuarón made. Her first husband was a leftist politician. When López Obrador was elected mayor of Mexico City in 2000, he launched Scheinbaum's political career by making her Secretary of Environment for the capital. She later joined his breakaway political group, the National Regeneration Movement, known as Morena, and was elected in 2015 as borough president of Tlalpan, a district in southern Mexico City. 3 years later, she was elected mayor of Mexico City, and he was elected president in a landslide victory for the Morena party. López Obrador vowed to put the poor first in a country she said had been hijacked by a corrupt and conservative elite. López Obrador's approval rating still tops 60%, making him one of the most popular leaders in Latin America. When he departs office in October, he will leave his successor with a strong economy that has been bolstered by the relocation of foreign firms from Asia and elsewhere to Mexico. The Mexican peso has been among the world's strongest currencies. Final slide here. But the next president will also inherit a number of crises, including dire water shortages, a struggling healthcare system, stubborn inequality, and violence from criminal gangs and cartels so severe that the U.S. State Department warns its citizens not to travel to many Mexican states. AMLO's controversial hugs not bullets strategy, which prioritizes social programs for the young over direct confrontations with cartels, has failed to stop the country's violence, although homicides have fallen some during the last 6 years. Security is by far Mexicans' main concern, polls show. Okay, so I'm going to toss to Russell because Russell did some research showing that a lot of the talking points against her policies are very similar to conservative arguments against liberal policies here vis-a-vis crime. But one thing I want to note is that the crime, it seems, in Mexico is not sort of like organic crime that arises from like desperate circumstances, in impoverished areas like here in the U.S. It's cartel violence. It's gang violence. Basically, CIA-sponsored cartel crime. Seems like more our fault than theirs.
I mean, that could just be the headline crime, though.
Could be.
I mean, you may have the other crime just doesn't even get any play because...
Perhaps, but all the reporting puts the emphasis there. They say that really the violence that's plaguing Mexico is cartel violence, which a lot of that doesn't even come from Mexico. A lot of that comes from countries south of Mexico as on the journey north.
That come up there, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the opposition party, PRIAN, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, they ran a campaign against her that is very familiar to any American and probably anyone in the West. They do this with the Tories versus, I mean, I don't know that they even need to run this kind of campaign against Labor except under Jeremy Corbyn. But all of the bugaboos that they're going to turn the country into Venezuela, which has particular residents in Mexico, but Trump used it here, right? They're going to turn the country into Venezuela. They're going to eliminate private property. The crime is going to spiral out of control, even though it didn't, according to this article, during Obrador's term. They still tried to invoke all of those right-wing tropes. Now, what's interesting to me is that, Caitlin Johnston will often say Americans are the most propagandized population on earth because and I think she's right for a lot of reasons. But one example is she won overwhelmingly in the face of those attacks.
Yes.
And Americans, they go, oh, if we elect a socialist, they're going to take my lawnmower. It's they are so susceptible to these arguments. And what's particularly insane in America is these kinds of appeals seem to particularly draw in people who really don't have shit to be confiscated. Really don't have anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they're you got the fucking fry cook over there who's worried about the socialists coming for his hamburger patties. It's and yeah, man. I mean, the Mexican people overwhelmingly rejected those arguments. Now, the other thing that is also kind of interesting is what Obrador did, because it's a mixed picture. He tripled the minimum wage. Millions were lifted out of poverty, but dire poverty actually tripled from 6% to 19% under him. Now, it seems that that's because he stopped a program that was means tested and targeted towards the poor, Progressa. He got rid of that. And he turned the pension program into a non-means tested program. It had been means tested, which a lot of people say we should do here. Why do you send Social Security to rich people who don't need it? That was what they had, and he got rid of that standard. But they also, I believe, quadrupled the pension amount. Now, some people argue that it's better to make programs universal because then you don't get political opposition to it. Then everybody buys in, and maybe that is part of his logic. But it seems like some of that money got taken away from the poorest people who no longer have Progressa. Now, on the bright side, they did, it's mentioned in that article, giving payments to students. That's part of a program where if they were not employed and if they were not in school, or to young people, they got paid apprenticeships. The government would subsidize paying for them to have an apprenticeship, so they're not just drawn into crime and drugs and what have you. And they also had a program to pay farmers to plant. So, hey, look, overall, and according to the article I read about this, even among the poorer populations that arguably have been negatively impacted by the reorientation of social welfare programs, Obrador was very popular. They were very supportive of what he's doing, and that might be because those populations have old people and young people in need of a job too. So in the end, you have people in those populations benefiting. But it sounds like almost like they had welfare and got rid of welfare and did much more precise kind of social programs where they greatly increased the amount of money that they were spending, but there's a certain population that doesn't fit those categories that fell through the cracks in the process.
Right. So, I mean, that's an interesting breakdown. But the thing that, I think just needs to be emphasized is she won 58-30. It was 2-1.
Right,
I mean, that is an absolute rout, rout. And so, that's basically giving AMLO a new term, and we will see, how all that shakes out. But it is definitely not a rejection of the incumbent party. That is definitely a doubling down on the incumbent party.
Please clap.